Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really tricky question, a paradox that sits right at the heart of art and activism. So, here's the big question we're wrestling with. Can you actually use the tools of a culture to genuinely challenge that very same culture? Or are you just, playing their game, making any real resistance doomed to fail from the start? All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. We'll tackle this through 6 key steps, and we'll be using one of the most famous and mysterious artists in the world to help us figure it out.
First things first, we got to define our terms. What do we even mean when we say cultural resistance?
Think of it like this. You're using the system's own language, its art, its music, its symbols, to poke holes in the system itself. It's a fight from the inside out. And when you talk about this kind of struggle, there's probably no better example on the planet than the anonymous street artist Banksy. So his work is this weird mix, right? It's illegal, but it's also worth a fortune. And that forces us to ask a really tough question. Is he a real rebel, or has he just become part of what some call the culture industry? That giant machine that can take any act of rebellion and just turn it into another product on their shelf. Okay, so how do we even begin to measure this? Well, a theorist named Stephen Duncombe came up with a pretty useful framework for this exact problem. See, Duncombe says it's not a simple yes, it's resistance, or no, it isn't. It's more of a sliding scale, and he gives us 3 things to look at to figure out where something lands on that scale. So let's take that framework, intention, actors, and results, and see how Banksy stacks up. Let's put him to the test. First up, intention. This one's a no-brainer with Banksy, right? The message itself is a challenge. But even more than that, the act of doing it, illegal graffiti, is a direct poke in the eye to property laws, to the establishment. The resistance is literally baked into the medium. Okay, next, actors. You might think it's just one guy, but it's not, because his art is out there, on the street for everyone. It forces you to stop and think, and it starts a conversation. It turns us, the public, into part of the act. But this is where it gets really sticky. The third step, results. Take his piece, Slave Labor. It was a powerful critique of consumerism and sweatshops. So what happened? They literally cut it out of the wall and sold it at auction for £750,000. The very system he was attacking just swallowed his critique whole and slapped a price tag on it. Wow. So that leads us to the next big question. Okay, how does the art itself actually work? What's he doing visually that makes it an act of resistance? Well, the philosopher John Elster drew this really useful line. A revolution totally tears down the old rules and builds something new. That's politics. But a rebellion, that just breaks the existing rules. And that's exactly what Banksy does. He's a master of rebellion.
His main weapon is something called culture jamming. He grabs these images, we all know, these icons from pop culture, and he just twists them. He flips their meaning on its head to show us something we weren't supposed to see. And get this, he even does it from inside the machine. He got asked to do the opening for The Simpsons, right? One of the biggest shows in the world. And what does he do? He uses that massive spotlight to show a dark, grim depiction of how cartoons are made. It was like sneaking a Trojan horse right into the heart of the media empire. Okay, so this is crucial. Even if the art is powerful, even if the intention is pure, can it survive? Or does time just wear it down and make it harmless? The cultural theorist Stuart Hall absolutely nailed it. He pointed out that the dominant culture is a master of diffusing threats. It's like what's a radical symbol one year just becomes a cool fashion statement the next. And you can see this paradox playing out perfectly with Banksy. Back then, his art was temporary. It might only last a few days. That was part of the point. But now his stuff gets covered in plexiglass and treated like a museum piece, a valuable asset. And the irony is, street art, which used to be a sign of rebellion, is now often a sign that an area is getting expensive and gentrified.
So, let's bring it all back together. We've looked at scale, creativity, and time. What's the verdict? Is cultural resistance just a contradiction in terms?
It seems like everywhere we look, it's the same story. This constant tug of war. Resistance pushes, and the system pulls it right back in. An artist challenges the system sells that challenge for $1 million. An artist subverts an image, pop culture just makes that subversion the new cool thing. A temporary act of defiance gets turned into a permanent, safe monument.
So the answer isn't a clean yes or no. What the source material suggests is that no, cultural resistance is not an oxymoron. It's totally possible,
But, and this is a huge but, it's incredibly fragile. It's precarious. It's always at risk of being swallowed up by the very thing it's trying to fight.
And that leaves us with one last big idea to chew on. If every successful rebellion just gets absorbed into the mainstream, then maybe a final victory isn't the point. Perhaps true cultural resistance isn't about winning. Maybe it's about the fight itself, a process that has to keep changing, keep reinventing itself, just to stay alive.